I'm on a busy street in Long Beach, California. Inside this warehouse behind me is one of the most significant car collections in America, and it's about to be auctioned off. I'm talking really old cars. This is the Stan Lucas collection.
Stan Lucas was a highly respected brass era, steam, and generally classic era collector for over 60 years. He had a lifelong passion for mechanical objects and automobiles, and he significantly never really sold any cars that he acquired over the years. So to have the opportunity to represent his entire collection in a public auction is quite significant and surely unrepeatable. Stan was an entrepreneur from an early age, and he had many different ventures, and it allowed him from the 1970s on to acquire some of the finest unrestored and original brass, nickel, and classic era cars. What makes this era particularly interesting is that the cars were individually created for their first owners. And so 80, 90, 100 years on, you have 5 Doble automobiles, and yet none of them are exactly identical. Stan was definitely part of the group, but also inspired by the group of great collectors such as Bill Harrah, Jack Passy, and others that in the 1940s and 50s sought out cars that others would think would be derelict, even worth scrapping, and not a part of society or history. And they knew that wasn't the case, that these were historically important objects, similar to art and antiques, and they saved a lot of cars, a lot of times in unrestored condition. And today we thank them for those efforts.
The size of this Oldsmobile is incredible. We can't even get the whole car in frame. Obviously, we're in a warehouse, and we have to work in between the cars with our camera setup. But this thing is a beast. And Olds was started in 1897 by Ransom Olds, and the curved dash Oldsmobile was America's first affordable car, predating the Model T Ford. But they quickly moved up market, right? And Ransom Olds, that was after he left the company. Yeah. So this is like the perfect example of that era for Oldsmobile.
Absolutely. It's the king of the antique era by size alone, and if not by luxury accompaniments. Has a 707 cubic inch inline 6-cylinder T-head engine, and the wheels measure 43 inches. They were built in limited numbers, and only really a handful of genuine Olds Limiteds exist today.
And when we talk about brass cars, this is what we're talking about, right? Because this predated the invention of chrome plating by many years, and then the nickel era starts in about 1918 or so. I guess the strict cutoff, if you're a Horseless Carriage Club member, is 1915, right?
Right,
but
pre-World War I.
Right, pre-World War I. And then you see nickel, but this is like the epitome of a brass car.
Absolutely. And of all the Olds Limiteds that exist, it's considered to be one of the top examples as far as originality of componentry. It even says Oldsmobile works under the running boards. And speaking of running boards, it has dual running boards because it is so physically tall. To get in, you need dual running boards.
You need a staircase.
That's right.
This is also the era prior to electric lighting. So these are all carbide lamps. When you mix carbide and water, it produces a chemical reaction which generates acetylene gas. So you would have a carbide generator mounted usually to the running board of a car, somewhere along the side at least, and then there would be tubing that would lead to each lamp to convey the gas to the lamp, and then you would light it like you would any lantern.
Certainly.
Many of these carbide lamps had a striker built in, so all you would have to do is hit the thumb wheel and light the lamp.
Yeah, and you can see that on these cowl-mounted lights. They have a thumb wheel striker.
People might be under the impression that these lamps were dim, but actually they were really bright. Some of them were so bright, it was one reason that brightness standards were instituted for automobile lighting.
And it's amazing, those are continually refined till today, and will continue to be as lighting technology moves on to LEDs and lasers, and it all has to do with the same subject matter, which is people need to be able to see down the road, but also see as a car's oncoming.
Another detail we should point out, and this is typical of the brass era, is that the top is not fastened to the windscreen.
Right.
The top is sort of self-supporting, but these leather straps keep tension on it when you're underway.
Yeah, in this era, the top was very much something that provided shade and protection from weather. But unlike today, it wasn't a fixture that sealed you off completely from the elements.
The seating in this car is like a salon, right? It's comfortable. It's like furniture in a home. Again, characteristic of these huge luxury brass cars.
Yeah, handcrafted, tufted leather. It's a nice place to spend hours on end.
All right, I got to try out this tumble home seat. So this was a pretty common design for these cars, right? A 7-passenger, you would have the folding seats.
Absolutely, and some cars would have a single mechanism that would allow them to fold in place and be fixed. And then this car has sort of a telescoping piece that has a support that supports the weight right down onto the frame.
It's not uncomfortable. I mean, you definitely have the best seat in the house in the rear. I would argue your seat is better than the front. You can really stretch out back there. But this is kind of like a stadium chair you'd bring to watch the game. All right, Cameron, what do we have here?
Here we have a Bentley Speed Six with original fabric coachwork by Van & Pla. The Speed Six was really the zenith model for Bentley. W.O. Bentley himself called it the best sporting car they had ever produced, and it led the company to 2 victories at Le Mans.
Now, a lot of Bentleys that were originally built as saloon cars have been converted to an open car similar to this one, essentially a replica, because they're sexier, they're more fun for touring, and they're less heavy than a big saloon car, better performance for that reason. But this is an original Van & Pla.
Right, the VDP Tourer, as they're referred to. There's almost an impression that there are more than there actually are in terms of the originals, because if you look at a Bentley Tourer, vintage racing circuits, you see a lot of them. But true original Van & Pla fabric-bodied Speed Sixes and other large Bentleys of the WO era are very unusual.
And this fabric body construction method was pioneered by a guy named Charles Wyman. He was a flyer in World War I and later applied aircraft construction methods to car bodies, because car bodies were still wooden frame and with a metal skin over, but they were creaky, they were noisy. And Wyman wanted to make a quieter, sort of more robust body for over the road, because after all, we know that roads were not what they are now. The fabric looks funny to us now, right?
Sure, the wreck scene, it's definitely non-traditional compared to what we see on today's modern cars with steel and aluminum and carbon fiber. And
right, and people might think of like a 70s or 80s American luxury car with a padded top. But in fact, this is a very hard-wearing material all throughout the sides of the body, and obviously a steel skin on the fenders and the bonnet and so forth. But yeah, marvelous car. All right, so here we have a Hispano-Suiza H6B, right?
Absolutely correct. And what makes this particular example unique, apart from, as you can see, its incredible unrestored condition, is the fact that it was sold new to Edsel Ford, son of Henry Ford. Edsel had outlandish tastes.
Edsel was really a European car enthusiast, and he'd spent time in Paris, right?
Absolutely.
And really appreciated the coach-built European cars.
Yeah, he owned over the years a Bugatti Type 35 and a Hispano-Suiza H6B. And for this particular car, he wanted something a little different. So he contacted Herman Brunn of Buffalo, New York, who operated the coach builder Brunn & Company, to create a completely bespoke dual windshield Phaeton. And correspondence notes dozens of requests as far as interior and exterior materials and finishes. And so not only is it unique as a Brunn-bodied Hispano-Suiza, but it was a crucial point in the relationship of Edsel Ford and Herman Brunn, who would later work for Ford.
And Hispano-Suiza was started by a Swiss engineer named Mark Burkett.
Exactly. And they initially created Voiturette racers, and then the appetite, particularly in America, was large, powerful luxury automobiles. And so as you got into the era of the H6B, they were larger, more powerful, and more comfortable. And the best coach builders of Europe were enlisted to create their coachwork. So highly unusual to see an American coach builder apply their mark to a Hispano-Suiza chassis.
All right, we gotta show everyone this car up close because, I mean, it's all there, right? That's the original upholstery and stuffing and, you know, the instruments and everything, but it's just in a weathered state. I would call it arrested decay.
Certainly. And there's something to be appreciated there. You can look at the horsehair in the upholstery and you can see how finishes have aged over time. So, you know, whether this goes to a museum as an incredible piece of Ford and automobile history, or someone decides to restore the car to as delivered specifications, the reference material is all right in front of us.
Can we take a look under the hood?
Certainly.
Big inline six.
Yeah, single overhead cam, pinion-driven camshaft, dual distributors.
Look at that water pump.
Yeah.
Cameron, I love Lincolns. This is a Model L, right?
Correct.
And I have a friend who has a Model L, and it's largely original, and it's just so much fun to ride around in.
Yeah.
It's a very similar car to this one. Cruising down the road in top gear, which is third.
Right.
It's a V8, and they're famous for their fork and blade design, right? Incredibly comfortable cars, and Lincoln has a certain elegance and an understated elegance that other luxury American cars of the period don't really have. That's my opinion.
Yeah, no, I can definitely agree with that opinion. An understated elegance is the perfect way to describe it. And Stan Lucas loved the Lincoln Mark and sought out really great original examples. And this definitely falls into that category. Almost completely original condition, very few owners over the years. And actually, when the car was new, it was loaned to President Calvin Coolidge for the summer of 1928.
Can we take a look under the hood?
Absolutely. As you go about your travels and attend vintage car events and see Lincolns, and you want to know how to look at a car in depth and decipher little details. As you look at the Greyhound, an original Lincoln Greyhound mascot, the tail is separate from its hind leg. And it's incredible because it's incredibly delicate. And so you can understand why over the years, as reproduction Greyhounds have been built, the tail was integrated in to the casting with the leg, a stronger piece that would stand the test of time. But to see a more delicate original piece having stood the test of time and be in incredible shape with the separated tail, I think that attests to the original condition of this car.
Okay, so here we have a Duesenberg J Murphy Roadster and a Doble Murphy Roadster.
Yeah, so these J's, they're officially referred to as a disappearing top convertible coupe. And this is an E-Series Doble with Murphy Roadster coachwork. And this is a side-by-side comparison that I've never seen before, and I don't know if we'll ever see again. There are obviously only a handful of these in the world. In fact, 3 with rear spares, and basically 2 such cars that have roadster coachwork of the E-Series Doble. So really incredible to compare the 2 side by side.
They're very similar in dimension, the height of the bodywork, the height of the windshield. The Murphy way is immediately visible.
Correct. And it's a testament to the modern design of the mechanicals of a Doble that if you didn't tell the average person that this was a steam-powered vehicle, and you said, yeah, this was Doble, you know, they were inline sixes or inline eights, combustion engines, when you look from the front corner, you might say, yeah, okay, that makes enough sense. And then you start to look at some of the interior and mechanical details and you think there's something more afoot.
Tell me about the Murphy Body Company.
Yeah, founded by Walter Murphy in Pasadena and known for their high quality construction and for the all metal body. Obviously early on you had wood structures clothed in aluminum or steel, and Murphy were really the first firm to create an all metal construction. It was more economic to produce and it lasted longer because you didn't have the short deterioration time of a natural wood.
And because of Murphy's location, Pasadena, you know, next door is Hollywood, right? Tinseltown, and they catered to the stars.
That's right. Some of the incredible Duesenbergs and Mercedes S-Series cars of the 1920s with Murphy coachwork are unbelievable. And you had fairly standard designs, convertible coupes and convertible sedans and fixed sedans. And then you had wild, rakish roadsters and polished boat tails beyond what you could even imagine.
I love the wind wings on the Doble,
Yeah.
which is not a feature you find on the Duesenberg.
No, that's interesting. I haven't noticed that. Yeah.
Now, although that's not a supercharged Duesenberg, which would be an SJ, that's a normally aspirated J. The SJ was the fastest American production car of the period. Jay Leno has said that his Doble pulls like a locomotive, which is what you would expect from a steam car, right? Like
Absolutely.
gobs and gobs of torque.
And not only that, you had Stanleys and Whites that would pull like a locomotive in a sense, lesser sense than a Doble. But a Doble can get up on the 405, get to 70, 75 miles an hour and maintain that speed. And like a locomotive, it's happy maintaining a high speed. It's actually low stressed at high speed, which is an interesting feature of steam automobiles and Dobles in particular.
Is there anywhere else in the world where you can see 5 Dobles side by side right now?
I don't think so. There are 5 here. There are perhaps the same amount or around the same amount at Jay Leno's garage. And then there are 1 or 2 here and there across a few private collections and museums around the world.
But it is considered the most advanced steam car ever built.
Absolutely.
Yeah, fantastic. Can we see the boiler?
Certainly.
So a steam engineer could tell you exactly how this works, but there's not a lot of people out there who have much of an understanding of this. Of course, Jay Leno owns Dobles and has done at least one very descriptive video. Nothing to it. All right, tell me about this car because I know next to nothing about Simplex.
Well, Simplex were built in New York, and they were modeled after the Mercedes Simplex, built around the turn of the century. And they were the finest American touring cars of the era. This particular car is 50 horsepower, which was a really perfect package to race and tour in and remains so today. And this is a 1909 Holbrook-bodied 50 horse, and it is the earliest complete 50 horsepower Simplex in existence. It was actually purchased as a college graduation gift for the first young owner.
Lucky guy.
Yeah, totally. And it's had a limited roster of owners over the years, but into the 1960s, it was owned by the Snyder family of Pennsylvania, and they acquired this car after World War II because their great-great-great-grandmother had owned a Holbrook 50 horsepower Simplex when new.
It almost goes without saying that this is a big car. Everyone can see that on camera, but it's not until you sit in a car like this that you really get a sense of the sheer size. I feel like I'm sitting in a cab-over truck or some kind of commercial vehicle. That's kind of the height we're talking about, or a lifted truck. but this would have given you an incredible view down the road and all around.
That's right. You have massive pedals in front of you, a huge 4-speed shift quadrant, and you're sat up very high. And you had a large T-head 4-cylinder engine with dual chain drive, allowing the car to move down the road at quite a rapid pace. Truly a beast.
Let's go take a look at the chain drive, because there's an access panel, right, that you can look at the sprocket through.
Certainly, if you had to clean the chains and service it in any manner, and like today, have a look.
All right, let's check it out.
I just love the twin spark T-head engine, exposed valve train, large magneto hanging out front. And the way the power progression or curve is on these engines is at low RPM they have what's called a T-head thump. They thump back and forth violently, honestly. And then you reach a certain RPM and they smooth out. And that's about the same time, say you're in second gear, when the car starts to leap down the road. They're quite fast and can maintain very high speeds for cars of the era. There's this quote that I'll just read it to you. Henry Austin Clark Jr., who was a very known collector. He says, with the cutout open, this is his first time driving a 50 horse, the cutout open, the sound is something like a minor disaster in an ammunition factory. As I reached second gear and accelerated, the entire car shook itself like a wet dog and then took off down the road. On a Simplex T-head engine in particular, you would say the cylinders are cast in pairs. And notice I didn't say cylinder heads, because the actual combustion chamber and the heads, the whole assembly is one cast iron unit, as you see here, painted black. And then it is fastened to the aluminum crankcase below.
There are two camshafts, one inlet and one exhaust, and they're both buried in the crankcase.
That's right. You can see here that, here you have the intake, and so the air is flowing through here, and the spark plugs are here, and here are your valves, and they're being driven by the camshaft, and it has a front timing cover because, of course, the cams are driven off of a gear, off of the crank, the front of the crank, and the craftsmanship in 1909 is unbelievable on these cars. And so it's really when you get down to the details of the build quality of the engine, chassis, and coachwork, frankly, as well, on these Simplexes, where you really understand why they were $5,000 in 1909. A huge sum in the day. Cozy.
This is cozy. Now, immediately, it's a completely different driver's position from the other brass cars. You could tell this is a performance car. The car's low slung compared to anything else of the day, but also your driving and seating position is low slung. It feels great. It says, I'm fast.
Yeah,
right?
A T-head Raceabout is one of the most wonderful cars to drive, period. I would say the best driving car of the brass era. They're very low slung. They're kind of notorious as a car that can't be flipped. There's a famous photo of Henry Austin Clark driving his through a field and trying his best to flip it, and it wasn't possible. They're just great cars, and ergonomically, everything is placed where it should be. The steering wheel, the 3-speed gearbox lever next to you, the handbrake, which is how you operate the majority of the brakes, the outrigger with the gas pedal, the all-important cutout mounted at center in the dash, the foot-operated magneto switch. It's all in the name of usability, and not only usability on a weekend drive, but in racing in the day.
Some people call the Mercer Raceabout the first supercar. And you can see why. All of these features that you've pointed out, it's a purpose-built machine, and as I understand it, in period, gentlemen would buy these cars, pull the fenders and headlights off, and go racing immediately.
That's right. Right here in Santa Monica, there were road races for years, going down to San Vicente and Ocean, and Mercer was highly victorious there with standard Raceabout models with the fenders removed, but also the factory Type 45 factory racing models. And yeah, it's a very simple process. Fenders, any lights, and you're off to the races. In fact, an 11, the first year they were built, they didn't have headlights mounted in front of the grille. All they had was a spotlight mounted on the dash, so it was even quicker to prep for racing.
Wind in your hair, carrying speed through corners, a very performance-oriented suspension, if you can say, for the day.
Completely, absolutely. Very flattened corners, and what's wonderful about these, whether you're setting the car up for a corner or coming to a complete stop, the handbrake is specifically engineered for performance driving. So it's not something that's kind of weak and things like this. Let's say you're going into a 45-degree corner, set the handbrake at 50%, and all you're worried about at that point is downshifting for that corner, powering through, and midway through the corner, let off the brake. Coming up to a stop, set the handbrake at 50 or 60%, and then you're doing your downshifting and coming to a stop. It's really a wonderfully set up car.
Another thing about this car is that it's more or less standardized controls as we know them today. You got a right foot throttle, center brake, and left foot clutch. And then on the steering wheel, the ignition advanced retard and a hand throttle.
Absolutely.
Marvelous. And I happen to know this is David Gooding's favorite.
Yeah, he's a big Mercer fan.
Okay, so Cameron, what's the provenance of this particular Raceabout?
Yeah, so this is a 12, which means it's the second year. They were built over 4 years, from 1911 to 1914. 11s and 12s are 3 speeds, 13s and 14s are 4 speeds. No 2 years are the same. So 12s have 6 carriage bolts, or hub bolts on the front hubs. They have rear axle stabilizing bar, and they are the first year of this sort of T design for the steering wheel supports. And the only year that a 3-speed Mercer had this steering wheel. So all 4-speed Mercers have this steering wheel, and cars, Raceabouts manufactured in 1911 have flat pieces here.
Yeah, this is like it's a cast-in gusset on the backside of each spoke of the steering wheel to keep it from flexing.
Right, no doubt they built them for the first year, and whether it was a race or a weekend drive, someone came around a corner and may have bent or cracked an 11 steering wheel.
I can definitely see where after repeated races there would be stress cracks in these spokes. Again, a hard ride no matter what you're driving in those days because the roads weren't great. And many of the road races were over dirt. You know,
certainly.
Circuits had not been established. So
dirt and gravel roads.
Exactly.
So this car was sold new in New York, and it's one of the most iconic Raceabouts there is because there are a set of photos where Charlie Stitch, a notorious Mercer mechanic, Smith Hempstone Oliver, who would later be the director of the Smithsonian, and Alec Ullman, the founder of the 12 Hours of Sebring, the three of them went and pulled this car out of a barn in New York in the 1940s to take back to Charlie Stitch's workshop in Manhattan to be restored. And people may have started to scrap these cars during World War II, things like that, and so components could be missing. It's very complete at that time as it comes out of the barn, and there's an iconic photo where Charlie Stitch is knelt down on the corner there and he's pulling the hub covers off to free up the hubs because, of course, they were flat towing it to his workshop with the station wagon. Ullman had the car for many more years, and Willett Brown, a well-known Los Angeles area car collector and personal manager for Tommy Lee of Don Lee Cadillac fame, owned the car after Alec Ullman, and Lucas acquired the car from Brown's collection some 30 years ago.
Cameron, thanks again for the tour.
My pleasure, Maurice.
And once again, the Stan Lucas collection presented by Gooding Christie's, Saturday, September 20th, 2025 in Long Beach, California. I'll have links down in the description and you won't want to miss it. Thanks for watching.